Unexpected truth revealed at the altar, inspiring cleaner exposes bride's amazing deception. Sarah had never felt such a rush of conflicting emotions. As she stood at the entrance of the grand hall, just a heartbeat away from the ceremony, the air was thick with joy and expectation. The laughter of guests floated towards her, blissfully unaware of the turmoil brewing in her heart. She had cleaned these halls countless times, but today felt different. Today, everything she knew about Emma the Golden Girl, the town's favorite, felt like a mirage, and she was the only one who saw through it. With each step she took to set the stage for a flawless wedding, shadows of her own sacrifices lurked. Sarah had spent years scrubbing floors, sacrificing her dreams to support her aging parents. A degree in English, a passion for writing lost in the dust of laundry. Now, there was this, a perfect day for an imperfect truth. She swallowed hard, remembering the moment she stumbled upon a hidden dossier in the bride's preparations. Each paper that slipped through her fingers revealed debts, secrets, a web of deceit that could unravel everything. The thought of exposing Emma sent a shudder through her. What if she spoke up? What would it do to her family? They had always taught her the importance of loyalty, yet here she was, catching the whiff of injustice. Her heart raced as she fished through a storm of desperation and resolve. Should she risk everything she worked for? The heavy silence of deceit was suffocating her. She could almost hear her mother's voice, urging her to uphold integrity, yet the threat of losing her job loomed like a storm cloud. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the violins began to play, filling the air with a dreamlike melody, Sarah tensed. Each note echoed inside her, a reminder she was living a lie while knowing the truth could shatter the happiness of so many. The bride floated past her toward the altar, a vision in white that made Sarah's stomach twist uncomfortably. Her hands, once steady, began to tremble. What if the murmurs of the town turned against her? What if her family bore the consequences of her revelation? She stood frozen, feeling the weight of every gaze on her as those loved ones readied themselves for what was meant to be a flawless union. Time slowed. Sarah could feel the soft breath of anticipation cascading over her, suffocating. A flicker of movement caught her eye. Emma paused at the edge of the aisle for a fleeting second, their eyes met. And in that moment, a revelation washed over Sarah. Was she truly fighting for truth, or was she simply scared of her own darkness? Just as the officiant prepared to speak, a particular question swirled through the crowd. Suddenly, the stakes soared in that single breath. Sarah had to confront herself. The clock ticked louder, and all she could do was stand and stare as an internal battle raged. Would she step into the light or retreat into shadow while a bride turned the page on her own story full of secrets? A crackle of tension snapped through the hall where joy was supposed to reign. Faces turned towards Sarah, silent questions hanging in the air. Doubt clawed at her insides like a ravenous beast. If she didn't act, she felt she would slowly wither away, robbed of the very essence of who she was meant to be. Sarah's heart pounded as she battled the instinct to shrivel in the shadows. Emma looked radiant, an image of dreaminess that only deepened her conflict. Each guest wrapped in their blissful ignorance made Sarah's skin crawl with awareness of the brewing storm. Could she bear to keep quiet any longer? A rush of clarity surged through her. She thought of her degree, gathering dust, the ambitions she had abandoned. Each ignored page of her life story was a painful reminder of paths not taken. She breathed, searching for her newfound resolve. Did she want to be the hero of her own narrative, or merely a spectator in someone else's charade? As Emma exchanged soft words with the officiant, blissfully unaware of Sarah's inner turmoil, a flood of determination cascaded over her. Perhaps revealing the truth was not simply about Emma's misleading facade but about reclaiming her own power. It was about standing tall, unapologetically, in her own skin and taking ownership of her life, which had been built from the ruins of her dreams. The officiant's voice began to smooth over the gathered audience, but Sarah's world was shifting. She could feel life's currents swirling around her, teasing yet demanding, prodding her to make a choice. The eyes focused on the altar masked the tempest inside her. They trusted her to fulfill her role, to maintain the sanctuary of the moment. But how could she balance keeping the bride's secret with her own integrity? What if she spoke up? During those few seconds racing on the precipice of decision, vivid images of her life flooded her mind. Memories of conversations with her parents, their loving but ever inquisitive eyes demanding truth as they worked relentlessly to provide a life for her. They had always taught her honor, yet here she stood on the brink of deceit. That realization cut deeper than any fear of losing her job. Suddenly, time accelerated, the chaos of the potential outcomes blurring her vision. Would she lose everything she had worked for, sacrifice the safety of her identity by standing up for the truth? Or would she lose herself in silence? Her thoughts skittered to her passion for writing. How long had it been since she had crafted a sentence that echoed her truth? The silence chatter that filled her day-to-day life suddenly became unbearable. With each heartbeat, her decision teetered closer not just to her conscience but to her destiny. The moment beckoned her. Sarah, a faint whisper echoed in her mind, a deep longing to express herself bubbling at the surface. Will she say something? Gasps around her reverberated like thunder. It was time to choose. But it wasn't just about the wedding, it was about her awakening, a pivotal juncture in the story of Sarah's life. Then, as the guests butted heads in hushed speculation, a new question clenched within her mind: what could she really gain if she ventured beyond this moment? Her pulse quickened again. The opportunity lay ahead, hushed yet monumental. It sparked a realization: she was not merely a cleaner or a silent observer of her life. Suddenly, she stood as the author of her destiny. And just as the officiant opened his mouth to begin the solemn vows, would she alter the script? The choice lay heavy, thrilling, on the tip of her tongue, ready to unravel or forge a path she had long buried. The air hung thick with expectation as the officiant's lips parted, yet time seemed to suspend itself for Sarah. In that fleeting moment, she caught a glimpse of her potential, a woman reborn, powerful beyond measure she had ever known. The first syllable slipped from the officiant's mouth, but Sarah's heartbeat drowned out the ceremony. Each thump resonated an undeniable urgency, a siren call for bravery. Could she dismantle the carefully orchestrated facade, laying bare the truth in front of all these witnesses? The thought ignited an internal wildfire, illuminating her longing for authenticity. Swallowing hard, she could almost feel the weight of her unspoken words. They had been tucked away in the crevices of doubt and hesitation for far too long. No longer could she remain tethered to the sidelines of her own story. All those years of believing herself to be merely a spectator washed over her, revealing a fierce woman whose voice had merely been muted. As if sensing her inner turmoil, Emma turned slightly, the radiant girl now an emblem of everything that Sarah had once aspired to be. A wave of protectiveness surged through her, battling against the tide of honesty she now felt compelled to unleash. Do I love her? Do I have to hurt her? The questions circled her mind like hawks descending on unwary prey. Yet, the cruel irony surfaced. Emma's grace and poise masked the bitterness of deceit, weighing heavily on the exchanges of their friendship. Hanging in the balance was Sarah's spirit, her right to claim the truth as her own. What legacy would she leave here today? The officiant's voice, thick with warmth and familiarity, drew her back into the moment. We gather here today. The words faded away as layers of her past unraveled before her. Every unsent message she had penned to herself, every late night spent crafting stories of love and betrayal. The world wanted her to be brave, to stand fiercely by those she cherished. Could she really dismantle Emma's moment in a room pulsating with joy and light? Wrestling with herself, the tension vibrated through her very core. The intricate dance of propriety twisted into an unholy knot, setting her heart on fire. Would her own truth scorch her more than it healed? Or would this act of courage ultimately become the crucible in which her ambitions ignited anew? The officiant's words suddenly crackled through the damp air once more. If anyone has reason to hold back, Sarah knew this was her moment. The audience leaned into the edges of their seats, breath bated, a communal doubt hanging ripe in the thickening air. At that instant, it evolved beyond mere concern for Emma, it had quietly transformed into her fight for freedom. "Stop," she found herself saying, her voice steady, powerful, eclipsing the fluttering thoughts that had paralyzed her for so long. Gasps swallowed the assembled crowd as the realization settled in this was no longer just about a wedding, but an awakening. The path carved before her twisted toward the uncharted territories of her true self, pulsating with the danger and thrill of honesty. Dark shadows ebbed away, revealing bright pools of possibility. For too long, she had been a vessel holding silence, but now, she surged ahead. Unbeknownst to her, the greatest battle had only just begun. With Emma's stunned expression at the forefront, the tension thickening around Sarah like a cloak, a new question pressed into her mind: what consequences awaited her for this bold revelation? The silence that followed her declaration was a heavy shroud, clinging tightly to Sarah's skin as she fought the tempest of emotions swirling in her gut. She could feel the weight of 100 eyes upon her, registering disbelief, shock, and even disdain. Emma blinked, her composure trembling like a delicate flame. The veneer of perfection began to crack, revealing unsettling vulnerability beneath her charming exterior. For a split second, Sarah could almost hear the gears of their shared past grinding against each other, shattering years of soft-spoken loyalty into shards of raw truth. She had anticipated resistance, but she hadn't prepared herself for the deafening silence. Emboldened by the tremor in her heart, she pressed on, drawing courage from this fragile moment. "Emma, I know," Emma gasped, her voice tightly wound. "What are you doing?" Anger flared behind the panic in her tone, and some guests shifted uncomfortably, whispering behind clasped hands. The officiant, stunned momentarily into silence, finally regained composure. Despite the audience's growing unease, Sarah stood anchored in her resolve. She hadn't just disrupted a wedding, she had challenged buried truths and long-resolved questions. "I won't allow you to walk into a lifetime of vows based on lies," she declared, the conviction amplifying in her voice, louder than her heartbeat. In that instant, Sarah discovered the profound weight of her own agency. This was more than a moment of defiance, it was an emergence from years of whispered inadequacies as she absorbed the reactions unfolding around her. The gasps and murmurs morphed into a cacophony of judgment, yet she remained steadfast, eyes glued to Emma's face, searching for any flicker of understanding. "Just stop. Please," Emma's voice cracked, her calm shattered. Sarah noted the glimmer of fury mixed with fear, the battle between guilt and pride churning inside this once beloved friend. Yet, Sarah was no longer the timid woman who would back down at the sight of conflict. "Why should I?" "You deserve to be free, Emma," she countered, her own truth fueling her words. "You deserve to know who you are. And we all deserve to see the reality of this moment, flawed as it is." The room vibrated with the intensity of her declaration, throwing her into an unexpected spotlight. This wasn't merely about Emma or the deception she had spun, it was about Sarah finding her own footing in an unstable world where truths had remained buried. The officiant intervened, his expression a nexus between authority and concern. "Perhaps we should know." Sarah's interjection cut through the tension again. She had intentions beyond mere interference now, she desired change, not just for herself, but for everyone ensnared by falsehoods, allowing unvoiced pain to dictate their lives. "This marriage cannot start on a lie." A collective realization rippled through the guests, the truth hanging heavy in the air like a storm ready to break. It was a moment that demanded further confrontation, one that threatened to unravel bonds once thought unbreakable. And amidst the charged silence, Sarah felt a fire igniting within, a palpable sense of purpose warming her from the inside out. She could no longer hide behind shadows, it was time to reforge connections, redefine her intentions, and rise above past hurts. But as she stood reborn, an unbidden voice inside whispered questions of her own journey. What would she sacrifice for this truth? And what ripples would echo from her boldness? With those thoughts churning in her mind, she pushed forward, her voice unwavering, asking herself if she had the strength not just to reveal the truth but to withstand its consequences. The realization dawned on her that this was about so much more than Emma. It was her own journey towards self-acceptance that loomed on the brink of transformation. With the gaze of the assembled crowd burning into her, ready for the sequel to unfold, Sarah clenched her fists, ready to face whatever storm was about to arrive. What would she discover about the depths of her courage in the coming battle? The tension in the air thickened, and Sarah felt every heartbeat resonate like thunder as the murmurs of the guests morphed into a suspenseful silence. She was acutely aware of Emma's eyes glistening, a mixture of fury and fear swirling within them. The bubble of denial that had cradled their friendship for so long was bursting, and Sarah was at the epicenter. This was not just a confrontation, it was an awakening. As the officiant looked between them with visible confusion, Sarah's mind raced with her own inner dialogue. She was no longer just fighting for Emma, she was reclaiming her own narrative, one riddled with fears she had silenced for years. Confidence was new territory, yet something deep within her spoke louder than the whispers of the crowd. It was a command, a burst of energy propelling her forward. "Look at us," she urged, her voice steady, grounding herself in the undeniable truth. "This isn't just about your marriage. It's about honesty, Emma. It's about who we are when the world is watching." Her hands trembled slightly, but she folded them into determined fists, refusing to allow her uncertainty to dictate her actions. Emma's face twisted in pain, and Sarah momentarily wondered whether cracking this facade was pulling back layers of both their identities. The vulnerability on display was unsettling, yet liberating. Now, she felt the urgency clenching her abdomen, the need to extend her revelation like a bridge, not just to Emma but to everyone trapped beneath the facade they all wore. The discomfort in the room was palpable, voices hushed as they sensed the hidden dynamics shifting in ways they hadn't expected. And in that shared breath, Sarah realized the undeniable ripple effect her truth could create. "Whatever you're feeling, Emma, you're not alone," she said, lowering her voice to a near whisper. "I've buried my own truths under layers of pleasantries, thinking it was easier to fit into someone else's expectations. But I won't do it anymore. Not for you, not for anyone." A flicker sparked in Emma's eyes, a glint of something raw beneath the hurt. But Sarah pushed on, her heart racing against the fight-or-flight instinct that urged her to retreat. "If you marry him today, it'll only masquerade what you're really feeling. It will be a life rooted in untruths. Choose freedom." The finality of her words echoed, and she felt the shift as the room held its collective breath. There was no soundtrack to cushion this moment, it was stark, vulnerable, and open. A window had opened, and it was clear Sarah wasn't pushing Emma only toward acknowledgement, she was compelling herself to confront her own fears, the ones that stymied her actions, shackled her ambitions, and undermined her self-worth. The officiant, still caught in disbelief, finally spoke up. "I think we should all take a moment to reflect on what's unfolding here." Though his intention was to calm the situation, it only sharpened the focus on Sarah and Emma. Glancing around, Sarah saw faces she recognized, friends and acquaintances who had been part of her life's backdrop, but who now appeared as mere shadows. Yet they were witnesses to her transformation, and she could not falter now. She had crossed into the realm of authenticity, and abandoning it now would mean betraying herself. Emma looked ready to react, the conflict palpable as her expression tightened. As she opened her mouth, Sarah braced herself for confrontation, unsure what would come next. Would Emma deflect, retreat into her comfort zone, or, in a moment of clarity, leap into the void of honesty? Emma started, her voice trembling. The undercurrent of confusion and pain crackled in the air, raw and electric. What might emerge from this confrontation? With every ounce of determination, Sarah breathed deeply, mentally prepared for whatever revelations lay ahead. She knew the next moment could change everything for both of them. She could feel the storm approaching, ready to unveil deeper layers of their truths. The question hung heavily above them: would they embrace the challenge or allow the tides of fear to pull them under once more? Emma's breath hitched, and the silence unfurled, exposing the jagged edges of her uncertain emotions. Sarah noticed the beads of sweat gathering at Emma's temple, each drop a testament to the fight waging within her friend. The ceremony around them had faded into an echo, as though the world had distilled down to this vertical axis of truth and deception. What was lost just a moment ago felt within reach now, and Sarah couldn't afford to backtrack. The stakes had never felt higher, yet she was slipping into clarity with every moment. This was more than speaking for Emma, it was a chance to redefine herself in an irrevocable manner. In this moment, Sarah recognized how she had been both a participant and an observer of her own life, ceding power to the whims of others, suppressing her own fervor. She had been waiting for permission to express her authentic self, and this was her emancipation. "Emma, just say it," she insisted, her tone soft yet unyielding. "Whatever you're feeling, whether it's fear or regret, own it. You deserve that. We all do." The words cascaded from her lips, revealing not just a plea but an unintentional assertion of her own desires. She wanted to be free too, free from the weight of her own unuttered truths. Wide-eyed, Emma hesitated, the conflict within her evident as she weighed the gravity of Sarah's challenge. "You don't understand. It's not just about me, I have everyone counting on me," she finally articulated, her voice a mix of frustration and despair. "I can't let them down." Understanding coursed through Sarah, a bridge built on the foundation of shared experiences. She was acutely aware of the imperative thrust upon Emma to conform, to don a mask of happiness that no longer fit. "But what about you?" Sarah countered, leaning closer, driven by her own developing clarity. "Isn't your happiness worth more than the expectations of others?" In that moment, Sarah realized that she not only wanted Emma to unearth her truth but simultaneously wanted to grasp her own. The transparency that came with vulnerability frightened her, yet it was also exhilarating. She felt cracks forming in the wall of her previous identity, and surprisingly, the fissures opened a fresh pathway, granting her new insight. The officiant remained still, a passive observer in a maelstrom fuming between two lives, thunderclouds gathering in the remnants of silence. Suddenly, an unexpected voice broke through. "Sarah's right," said a figure from the audience, a fellow friend who had once been a mere spectator but now seemed propelled by a similar current of courage. "Authenticity is hard, but it's the only way forward." Encouraged by this newfound support, was this the moment when truth might start to dismantle oppressive norms that had encased both women? Sarah felt a bloom of energy within her, igniting a sense of purpose. It was clear she wasn't alone in her desires, there were ripples of awakening sweeping through others in attendance. Emma's eyes darted toward the encouraging face, then back to Sarah, wrestling between the familiarity of expectations and the liberating allure of honesty. Sarah took a step closer, her heart hammering against her chest. This was no longer merely about the impending wedding, it was about a seismic shift in Emma's life, one that could certainly demand its shattering consequences. "Emma," Sarah whispered intently, "what do you truly want? There are no wrong answers here." As realization began to settle on Emma's shoulders, Sarah held her breath. The world awaited the answer, and with it, the acknowledgement of what lay unspoken could alter the course of their lives forever. The room vibrated with potential, a pause heavy with anticipation. Would they all embrace this profound honesty, or would they retreat once more, sealing their fates in silence and conformity? The question lingered, charged with urgency. How much longer could Sarah withstand not knowing? The moment hung suspended, an electrifying stillness that bound everyone in wavering anticipation. Emma's face twisted between dread and the spark of something else, liberation. Sarah could see the internal battle flash across her features, each fleeting expression like a wave threatening to breach a dam. The whispers surrounding them faded even further, as if the very air bowed to the gravity of the ultimate question. "Emma," Sarah repeated, her voice almost a reverent murmur now. "What is it? Just let it out." A shift occurred in Emma, a quivering breath that spoke of an impending release. It was that tangible, weighty tension that coiled within but longed to escape. Sarah felt a primal instinct take hold, urging her to peel back another layer of fear that clung to their surroundings. Maybe Emma's voice wavered, uncertain yet daring. Maybe it's too much. But there it lingered, that tantalizing word, maybe. It echoed in Sarah's mind with an intensity that urged action. This was less a momentary slip and more a fracture in the facade that encapsulated both their lives. No, Sarah interjected, almost forcefully, the raw urgency behind her words clashing with her instincts for encouragement. Don't hold back. Everyone here feels it, too. Your truth can set them free. The power of that statement slammed into Sarah as much as it did Emma. For so long, she had swallowed her own truths beneath layers of expectation and pretense. The prospect of speaking them aloud, letting the world see them, would be cathartic yet terrifying. With each passing moment, the silence grew heavier, filled with the unexpressed emotions of not just Emma but everyone present. Sarah took a step back, yearning to let Emma's voice cut through the suffocating quiet, yet she wrestled with her own unease. She thought back to her own moments of repression, the times she bowed to others' whims instead of pursuing her own desires. What could she possibly achieve by allowing fear to dictate her actions yet again? Emma's gaze flicked around the room, searching for support, for an anchor amid the swirling uncertainty. Sarah understood the urgency behind that flicker. There was something elemental demanding acknowledgement, something lurking in the shadows of their otherwise curated lives. Slowly, Emma's resolve began forming like a delicate thread weaving into a tapestry of resilience. She hesitated again, glancing at a familiar face in the crowd, someone who had urged her on before. I don't want to go through with the wedding. The words came tumbling out, each syllable resonating against the walls that once boxed her in. Emma's scattered thoughts disentangled, revealing clarity amidst chaos. A rush of exhilaration swept over both women as Sarah consumed the weight of potential that filled the air. As Emma's voice steadied, a soft wave of courage washed over Sarah, igniting that previously fading ember within. What if she stood firm now in her own truth, spurred on by the bravery of her friend? A sense of unity took root in the crowd, shifting the atmosphere from trepidation to something exhilaratingly transformative. But before Emma could elaborate, a stirring voice broke through, too familiar, too precarious. You're making a mistake, Emma. Sarah turned, muscles tightening in a flash of instinctive protectiveness. It was a voice she recognized all too well, the embodiment of the expectations they both sought to escape. Every instinct screamed to shield Emma from the confrontation, yet part of her found strength in impromptu unity, the very essence of her own budding authenticity. Would she confront the embodiment of doubt for Emma's sake? Could she articulate her own truths amid such tumult? The room crackled with charged potential as Sarah felt herself on the precipice of a choice that could redefine both her and Emma's paths forever. One thing was certain, as the stakes escalated, she would face whatever was coming next, which could lead to an unexpected revelation that would alter the course of their lives. The air buzzed with tension, almost electric, a collective breath held as Sarah's eyes snapped back to Emma. That sharp voice, laced with judgment, echoed in Sarah's mind as she weighed the gravity of what was happening. Sarah could feel Emma's embarrassment piercing through the crowd, creating an invisible barrier between her friend and absolute conviction. Who are you to tell her what to do? Sarah felt an impulse rise within her, raw and unfiltered. It was a clarion call to arms against the familiar voice of condescension and tradition that had governed their lives for far too long. Every instinct told her to protect Emma, to affirm her radical choices with unapologetic support. Turning, she faced the voice directly, her heart racing. This is her life. Emma deserves to make her own decisions without fear of judgment. The words spilled out before she could reconsider their weight. Conversations had existed in this space before, structured in layers of polite discourse rarely punctured by truth. But now, the shift was palpable, and her voice confident, assertive, cut through every doubt she had ever entertained. A pause stretched in the room, a moment where everyone seemed to jolt awake from some collective slumber. Emma's eyes widened, and for the first time, Sarah could see a flicker of hope igniting in her friend's expression. That kind of recognition pointing directly at the societal chains they both had been shackled to began to pour color back into Emma's pale visage. "Sarah," Emma whispered, her voice trembling but now bolstered by a newfound momentum. "I didn't know I could say that, to be honest about my feelings." The voice of opposition faltered, its familiar authority gasping for footing among the waves of solidarity rising around them. "But Emma, think about the consequences. Think about your family. Think about what I want," Emma countered, this time her voice ringing clear, defiance shimmering in her eyes. A ripple surged through the crowd as others began murmuring their own truths, echoed musings interweaving in a tapestry of liberation. Sarah noticed the fragments of others' stories surfacing. She had never seen this before. It was chaos and clarity intertwining, a reality both terrifying and beautiful. Where once hesitation had gripped them, now people boldly echoed sentiments akin to Emma's. "Yes, we've all felt it, expectations stifling our true selves," one woman added, emboldened. Sarah's heart raced at the powerful synthesis unfolding, a collective awakening burgeoning with each voice chiming in. This was no longer just Emma's moment, it was a rallying cry for everyone hidden in the shadows of conformity. Yet beneath the surface excitement, Sarah felt the tension of an important choice pressing on her. She had long been the one who retreated when conflict arose, who yielded to others' desires over her own. Would she continue to dance around her fears, or was this moment the time to confront her truth? As she stole a glance at Emma, whose determination now radiated as brightly as the sun filtering through the ceiling above, a pang of motivation surged through her veins. Emma's bravery had ignited something deep in Sarah. Perhaps it was the courage to face her own truths, to no longer hide from the essence of who she was. But even as the walls around them began to tremble from the tremors of personal revelations, another voice rose sharp, piercing. "If you believe in this betrayal, you're as lost as she is." It pierced the air like a shard of ice, a reminder that some would fight tooth and nail against change. Who are you to decide what is best for anyone? Sarah turned back, her resolve solidifying further. Would she stand firm and continue to challenge the status quo, not just for Emma, but for herself? It was clear now, this moment wasn't just a revelation for Emma, it could transform Sarah as well. And as the confrontation brewed, an undeniable certainty took root. The moment to face her own fears was drawing near. What would Sarah choose to reveal in the wake of this chaos? The impending resolution simmered on the horizon, and one thing became achingly clear: both she and Emma were about to embark on an uncharted path, poised for inevitable change. Would they embrace it, or would they retreat back into their shadows? The cacophony of voices faded momentarily as Sarah's heart thundered in her chest. She hadn't anticipated this eruption of collective defiance, yet her own fear loomed larger than ever. She felt it clawing at her throat, threatening to choke her resolve. Could she really stand up and battle the deep-seated norms that had dictated her life and the lives of those around her? Emma's trembling form steadied as she stood taller, weaving herself into this tapestry of change. That visual, her friend's metamorphosis from a quiet shadow into a beacon of authenticity, instigated a deep existential wrestling within Sarah. The gnawing voice of doubt whispered that she would never find her own voice. But as she scanned the crowd, she saw nods of recognition, faces reflecting her own turmoil, and that stoked an ember of empowerment deep within her. Now is not the time to falter, Sarah, she muttered under her breath. Yet how? How do you confront a lifetime of learned behavior? It wasn't just about standing up for Emma, this was about dismantling the fortress she had built around herself, brick by uncomfortable brick. With every heartbeat echoing the conviction of those around her, she turned once more to face the opponents skirting the edges. You call this betrayal? It's a path to self-actualization, a reclamation of our lives. Each word dripped with newfound courage, pushing the boundaries of her comfort zone further than she believed possible. The icy voice flailed against her declaration but was soon drowned out by murmurs of support swirling like a cyclone. Emma's eyes sparkled now, an unspoken camaraderie forming between them. In that moment, Sarah glimpsed an opening, a way to lift the weight of uncertainty that had so long cloaked her essence. Perhaps the very thing holding her back was the notion of maintaining peace at the cost of her truth. Deep down, Sarah understood this was not merely about Emma's choices. This confrontation beckoned her to navigate her own desires, those suppressed dreams tugging persistently at her heartstrings. The realization that she hadn't merely been a bystander in her life burned bright, a sense of personal responsibility igniting a passion for authenticity. As the crowd's energy reached a fever pitch, she felt the currents of change electrifying the environment. The walls born of respect and convention began to splinter, and Sarah stood at the epicenter ready to shatter her fears into shards of motivation. If we don't own our stories, who will? The truth of that question resonated, casting out shadows of hesitation. With that truth swirling through her consciousness, she realized she had hidden a gem within herself, a talent for storytelling, a powerful gift she had long tucked away under layers of mediocrity. What if she could harness her voice and share it, much like Emma had? What if this was the extension of her challenge, to unearth the truths she had buried in her own narrative? The time has come to speak, she declared, her voice cutting through the tumult. The words came from a place of urgency, a growing restlessness that demanded to be articulated. Would she truly be able to embrace her own storytelling journey? As fervor surged within her, she anticipated the inevitable tension this revelation might evoke. And then came the response, a ripple of uncertainty, a moment caught between acceptance and fear. Across the room, faces turned toward her, searching for direction, waiting with bated breath. Would she seize this moment with clarity or let it slip away like sand through her fingers? The question loomed before her, beckoning her further down this path of authenticity she'd only just begun to uncover. As the realization settled, Sarah felt the drift between past misgivings and future possibilities. A breeze danced through the venue, and with it came the sweet scent of empowerment. This was just the beginning, and she could feel change settling in the marrow of her bones. What tale awaited her on the other side of this revelation, waiting for discovery in the shadows of her suppressed ambitions? The air grew heavy with anticipation both for herself and for Emma as they stood on the brink of their respective truths, trembling at the precipice of their newfound freedom. What would Sarah dare to unveil next in this journey towards authentic self? The air was electric with anticipation as Sarah stood steadfast, her heart racing in sync with the rapid shifts unfolding around her. Each moment felt like a pivotal scene in a story waiting to be told. No longer merely a silent observer, she was now igniting her own transformation, emerging with clarity and purpose. Emma's voice, now rising above the noise of uncertainty, cracked through the tension in the room. I can't pretend anymore, not just for you or my parents. These words resonated, bursting through the silence like fireworks, illuminating paths to freedom rather than suffocating facades. An overwhelming surge of support enveloped them both. It was palpable this was a moment of collective awakening. In that instant, the realization dawned upon Sarah: she had long considered herself a cleaner, one who scrubbed away the grime of others' lives while her own dreams lay neglected. But here, in this charged atmosphere, accessing her voice no longer felt like a risk but a necessity, a bold claiming of her identity. The world she once felt confined by shifted. As she listened to Emma vocalize the pain of untruths, she began to see reflections of her own struggles in the layered facade built over years. Every history of suppressed ambitions, every unwritten story, unraveled before her. It dawned on her that to embrace one's authenticity was not only a personal choice but a collective rallying cry against the injustices they each faced. Let this choice honor both of our truths, Sarah implored Emma, her voice steady, driven by the urgency of their shared journey. Let us forge ahead, not just for this moment but for every moment we've felt muted or invisible. The power behind her words ignited the spirit around them, coaxing forth nuances of hope and burgeoning courage from both the known and unknown audience. Amidst this chaotic sea of expectation, an undeniable synergy emerged. Guests began to nod in agreement, each acknowledging the brilliance of authenticity eclipsing the fear of judgment. Conversations blossomed as people processed their sentiments of repression and solidarity, and Sarah felt a warm flush of confidence swell within her. She thought of her English degree, stagnant and dusty, as she resolved to infuse life into the words that had waited far too long to escape her pen. The tales of courage she had always yearned to tell suddenly seemed within reach, not just aspirations but a tangible reality. That momentary spark she felt transformed into a fire, an invigorating energy that cascaded through her spirit, and she knew she would not allow it to extinguish. "Emma," she persisted, unwavering, "this is not just our moment, it is an invitation for everyone to step into their power. Let us take a leap of faith together." In that moment, Sarah felt an expanded sense of self, each word empowering her resolve. Emma nodded, a mixture of awe and alignment clouding her features. The tension that had once held her captive began to peel away like layers of an onion, revealing the radiant core of authenticity beneath. Emma's gaze locked with Sarah's, and they each understood a pivotal truth: standing for oneself equated to standing for each other. As the room began to pulse with renewed energy, Sarah felt free from her past limitations. She could almost hear a quiet narrative whispering that she had been neither a keeper of silence nor merely a cleaner scrubbing away the grime of others. She was a storyteller, waiting to reclaim her space. Gazing around at the evolving dynamics in the once locked hall, she saw faces filled with admiration and hope, reflecting back the courage she had uncovered and embraced. Defining who she was had become an act of bravery. She had achieved a personal victory, revealing the hidden layers of her identity and budding ambitions to not just unify with Emma but to join a sea of others yearning for freedom from their confinements. The officiant finally stepped forward, stunned but eager to regain his composure in the sea of emotional revelations. "Perhaps today is less about rituals and more about choice," he muttered, a slight smile gracing his lips, affirming the monumental shift. As Emma and Sarah stood united, the tangible weight of their decisions crystallized into something far more profound. Their individual resolutions became a narrative larger than themselves, a collective move toward liberation, a call beyond masks, expectations, and silenced voices. In the end, not only had Sarah found her voice, but she had positioned herself firmly as an active participant in writing her own story, one punctuated by authenticity and ambition. The dawn of her newfound confidence illuminated promises of the unknown, and she stood ready to embrace whatever came next, armed with the clarity of true conviction. The echoes of applause surged through the crowd, washing over Sarah as they rose to celebrate this newly realized freedom. Each clap resonated with newfound integrity. "And now," she proclaimed as applause subsided, "let us honor the truth that binds us together. When we reclaim our voices, we ignite possibility for others and breathe life into our dreams." It was a moment to be cherished, a collective victory of individual truths shining against the shadows of societal expectations. Standing hand in hand, Sarah looked towards Emma, knowing their shared journey had only just begun. They would forge ahead, not merely as remnants bound by duty but as pioneers of their empowered destinies. This was their moment, now. As the applause faded, a pressing urge surged through Sarah: "You need to subscribe now to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and ensure stories like theirs reach those who need inspiration. Comment your reactions and theories about endings unfolding in their lives. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this transformational conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting this channel through these actions.